Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. My name is Paul and I'm your host. And today I'm joined by another member of the iPhone family. There are so many people called iPhone as a second name. So today we've got Joanna's iPhone. Hello, Joanna's iPhone. How are you doing?
Hi there, Paul. Yeah, I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
I am splendiferous, thank you. It's just amazing to be, joined by this huge family of people called iPhone. It's great. I just love it. I've not met anybody called Android yet.
No,
That's really bizarre.
no,
I mean, lots of people called it iPhone, but not Android. So
no. It's commonly.
you're in Cheltenham, in Gloucestershire, aren't you?
That's right. Yes,
I
I
mean, we
am.
just before we went live, we talked about the weather, kind of like grim and grey. So the whole of the UK must be covered in kind of grim grey weather today, and it's almost July. Do you realise in 2 days it's July? Ugh,
I
what's
know.
happened to summer?
I know. I'm praying that July will be the month. That's when we'll get the nice weather. I'm hoping, keeping everything crossed.
Well, July and August is supposed to be nice, but I can remember last year from April right the way through seemed to be a really, really brilliant year weather-wise. I mean, we had lockdown and everything, but we were still able to get out. And I can see I remember all the pictures of people being told to stay away, and yet all the kind of picturesque beaches across the UK just rammed with people. It's funny old times. But we
Yeah.
ain't talking about that today because we're going to talk about other things. So, Joanna, what brings you to the show? And I said that deliberately because if I say it really quick, I get my words mixed up.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me along today. So, yeah, I suppose it was really just to talk a little bit about, I suppose that, as you say, we've been through some challenging times over the last year or so, and certainly in the UK as we're starting to come out of lockdown and as the vaccine program's being rolled out, I think this brings with it obviously hope, but also new challenges around that. And I know, talking to a lot of people, they're perhaps feeling a mixture of emotions. So excitement to be able to, perhaps get some normality back in our lives, but also what does that mean? And can be creating some feelings of stress and overwhelm, and that's an area that I do a lot of work in. So I thought maybe we could have a little chat about that today, and sort of share some ideas on how people might be able to manage these times of change that we are living in at the moment.
You mentioned two words there, Joe. Do you prefer
Mm.
Joanna or Joe?
I'm happy with either. Joe's fine, but yeah, I'm happy either way.
Okay, Joe. Look, you mentioned two words: stress and overwhelm. Some stress, I think it's called eustress, is a natural part of us, and we actually need that to keep the blood pumping, what have you. But do
Yeah.
you think that stress and overwhelm are kind of self-inflicted to a certain extent?
So yeah, you make a good point in terms of stress. I think stress is a word that is used a lot in day to day vocabulary, and you're right. I think a lot of people see stress as a negative thing, but short bursts of stress is actually a good thing. It's there to help us. Like all of our emotions are there for a reason, and so if we're taking a test, an exam, then it's there to help us be more alert, concentrate better, perform better. But it's the prolonged periods of stress that can have obviously the negative effects really. And when you said about is it self-inflicted, actually no, it isn't. I don't think it's, because the reason I say that is because a lot of time people think that stress and overwhelm is a result of external events that will then directly affect us and create feelings of stress and overwhelm, when actually it's what's happening internally. So it's our perception of these events or our beliefs around things that lead us to have to create the feelings of stress and overwhelm, which will then impact on how we behave. So the reason why I said no, I don't think it's self-inflicted, because we always make choices in lives based on what we think is best for us at that time. And when we have our beliefs that are influencing how we feel and how we behave, a lot of our beliefs are formed at a really early age, and a lot of our beliefs are stored at a subconscious level. So we may be holding on to a lot of beliefs that lead us to feel stressed and overwhelmed. So an example of that is around, feeling like I'm not good enough or I'm not smart enough to do something, will then fuel that feeling of overwhelm, because it's like, well, I need to prove myself because I'm not good enough, and I need to work harder, and I need to do this, that, and the other. And then that can create the feelings of stress and overwhelm. So my personal opinion, I think, no, I don't think, because nobody would purposely go out there to say, right, I want to feel stressed, I want to feel overwhelmed. It's a result of, beliefs and our actions.
I agree to a certain extent that most people don't want to go out there and feel stressed and what have you.
Mm.
But see, my understanding is that stress originated because when we were evolving, there were still saber-toothed tigers and
Mm.
lions and bears in much more, what's what I'm looking for, preponderance. There were more of them, yeah?
Yeah,
And there were
yeah,
more threats to our bodily health than exist today, primarily. So
yes,
you had to be prepared to face a threat around every corner. So you'd go around it, you'd be ready with your spear or your stick or your stones or whatever, and you go,
yeah,
thank God for that. No predators here. I can relax a little bit and carry on.
yeah.
The thing is, the way I see it is that society has evolved, but as
Mm.
human beings, we haven't evolved because we still have that kind of fight, flight, or freeze response. We still have that image, in I can't speak today, we still have that image of there being a saber-toothed tiger behind
Mm.
lots of corners. But the saber-toothed tiger has now become the meeting we don't want to have, the
Yeah.
angry boss, or the drunk who's swearing in a corner kind of thing. That is the new saber-toothed tiger. And for a
Mm.
lot of us, we haven't kind of done anything to 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 change that feeling, to change that, it's just some idiot in the corner, I can just ignore them and carry on. We still think saber-tooth tiger, which is why a lot of people, I believe, have feelings of overwhelm and stress that could potentially they could deal with in a better way than they're dealing with now.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. It's definitely, as we've evolved and society's evolved, you're right that we still have this innate, response to any perceived danger. And as you say, back looking at caveman times, that was the saber-toothed tiger. Now it's what's our perceived threat to us. So is it that fear of, rejection or getting something wrong or criticism or judgment? And that's around, the beliefs that we form from an early age. So from, the experiences and what we go through and what we adopt from, the people around us and society. And I think that, that then as we go through life, we continue to experience more, and that reinforces it. So I think you're right that there is that innate flight, fight, or freeze response, but it's then we've developed these perceptions and beliefs around what are our perceived dangers now, and then we've not done the work to actually address that so that we have a more healthy response to the perceived dangers. Definitely.
Do you think, Joe, that as society progresses, that we as human beings, particularly in the West, are getting weaker? And what I mean by that is, if you go to, say, just during World War II, people were a lot more resilient. They were able to deal with stuff and get on with things without kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Use things like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah, there's bombs falling, so I've got to go to the bomb shelter. I've got to deal with it. But once the bombing raid is over, we get out, we get on, we stuff, we get on with life. Yeah, we can't kind of live with this shadow over us all the time. We've got to carry on. Whereas today, I get the distinct impression that whenever something happens, lots of people, I don't want to say they decide, but it's almost like they decide to be affected by something, even if it's halfway across the world and has no direct impact on them.
Hmm. No, that's a really good question. And I think, yeah, I suppose there's a number of factors there. So, as you say, what's happening in other parts of the world, we wouldn't have necessarily known because we didn't have the media, TV coverage, the news coverage, etc. So we were focusing more on what's in our immediate environment and world. And I think And I think another thing is that, it's hard to know how people would have responded, or their perception of things, back in First World War, Second World War, to how people respond now. Because I think there's a change in our culture that we can be more open and honest, and that actually it's a good thing to talk about our feelings, and about our mental health and well-being is just as important as our physical health. So I think there's definitely a change there as well, that people feel, I mean, there's still a long way to go, I think, but people can be more open and honest, instead of this, right, well, I've just got to push through and just deal with this. And actually that can have detrimental impact on people's mental health and well-being. So I think there are a number of factors that have changed there that will make it harder to make that comparison. But I'd love to know your thoughts on that question. It's a really good one.
I actually think that we are becoming physically weaker and mentally weaker. And let me give you an example. Going back, 100 years, a couple of 100 years, most of us were in physically demanding jobs. Or if they weren't physically demanding jobs, we were working very, very long hours. And yet there's lots of disease and stuff going around. But those of us that were able to survive, I say us because I'm talking about the human species, yeah, were seem to be able to get through more than we're able to get through today. I mean, just take physical strength. We are not as physically active as we were even 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There are less. And again, I'm not blaming anybody. This is not trying to point the finger. I'm just saying, as a fact, we don't play as much sport. When I was a kid, and I know this is the same for lots of people my age, school holidays, you got up, you had your breakfast, you were kicked outside, and you spent the day playing outside with your mates. 12 o'clock would come, all the mums would stand out on the step and go, Paul, Susan, Mary, Fred, Jane, lunch. So you'd all disappear back in the house for half an hour, have something to eat, you'd be kicked out again, and then that would be repeated at 5 o'clock. And that's, you got ill, you got cold, your fingers got covered in mud and stuff, and you go home, wash hands, and that was it. You just got on with things. Whereas today there's this perception that everything is dangerous. And again, I think that becomes, like you mentioned earlier on, Joe, we are, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, we are bombarded with news from around the world. When even in my day, not in my day, but when I was a kid, there were only 3 TV channels, and the news was limited to once every couple of hours. And so you weren't as exposed to what was going on in the big wide world. Or it kind of, you got it, but it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Because the newspapers were always 12 hours out of date kind of thing. So I guess your kind of brain had time to absorb the information because it happened yesterday. I mean, I was a natural born warrior. I mean, I can remember people talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I can vaguely remember the Kennedy assassination. I probably picked it up a few years later, to the hindsight talking, and the Cold War and the Iron Curtain, and whenever the Americans and the Russians got really close together, and stuff happening. And yeah, I used to kind of worry about all this kind of stuff. And then I just realized one day that there was nothing I could do about it. If Russia and America decided to start pushing buttons, then yeah, we're all screwed. And me sitting here worrying about that potential eventuality, I couldn't do anything about it. A meteor, because in the 70s and 80s, meteors were a big thing. Coming direct to Earth. There were lots of movies around about the end of the world, and it usually kind of some big piece of rock hitting the planet and split it in half. And there were all kinds of horror stories of how the world was going to end. And I used to worry about all of them until that one day when I kind of realized, look, there's nothing I can do about it. The chances are that big of it actually happening. And so I stopped worrying about it. But I think today, so many more people spend so much time being plugged into the internet and to the news that they just worry about every single thing that happens on the planet, even though it's going to have zero impact on them. And that concerns me, because the more people do this, the more unnecessary stress and overwhelm they're taking on board. And it's almost like it's kind of shortening their life. 100 years ago, it was viruses and poor health and safety and stuff like this that made us susceptible to death and illness. But today, it's much more likely to be kind of the stress related and the poor general health. So to answer your question, yeah, I do think we are getting both mentally and physically weaker, and I don't think that's a good thing.
No, you make some really great points there. I think coming back to like the physical health, but I think also in terms of the mental health and well-being as well, that we're not as active as we have been in previous sort of decades and generations, and that is something that we are seeing playing out as well. And yeah, there's obviously society changes, and it's that evolving with it. But I think you're right in terms of our consumption of media and just 24/7 being plugged into that. And I think when you talk about as well that control element, I think a lot of the time when we're being bombarded with so much negative media, or that creates the stress and overwhelm, that we then feel like we don't have control because there's so much going on, and we like to have that stability and that control to feel safe, but because we don't have the control, we want the control. That's where we then have that conflict of the stress and overwhelm as well. So like you say, being aware of that and thinking, okay, well, what is in my my sphere of control? What can I control? What do I have control of? I have control over what I think, how I respond to things, and actually what's outside of my control, worrying about it isn't going to change it. And I think that can be quite empowering. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, when you say that, probably 99.9 recurring things are outside of our control. And the only thing, like you just said, the only things we can control are how we decide to think and how we decide to respond to events. Now, yes, we are preconditioned to fight, flight, or freeze, but we still have a choice, and there are alternatives. One of the things that I find really fascinating is how people blame these things, yeah, for our woes. And it's really fascinating because it's just a tool. Now, again, when I was a kid, these things didn't exist. It was plugged into the wall with a long wire, and you only went to it if you were going to make a call or it rang. And I was having a conversation with somebody on a Sunday about the fact that when I go to bed, this stays in another room and I don't take it to bed with me. And she was going, I couldn't possibly do that. I couldn't possibly do that. I said, why not? What happens if it's an emergency? I said, right, okay, in the past 10 years, how many calls have you had? Well, I've had lots. Right, how many were emergencies? Well, my daughter rang me the other day and she was drunk and she rang me at 4:30. Is that an emergency? No. Then this happened. And we kind of analyzed. She talked about all these times she'd been called after midnight, and that all of them were inconsequential things that could have waited or could have been ignored. But to me, that means you go to bed stressed because you're taking this with you in case of an emergency.
Yeah.
Now, most of us don't have emergencies that happen, after 11 o'clock and before 7 a.m. in the morning. And so we don't need these. But so this is what I was talking about people choosing to be stressed and choosing to be overwhelmed. If you take this to bed with you, you're kind of automatically saying, oh, as soon as I wake up, I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to check the news. I'm going to check my emails. Oh, what a great way to start your day. Oh, look, your boss goes, Paul, you're an idiot. You didn't do that thing. That's a really great thing to see when you open your eyes, isn't it, in the morning?
Yeah.
Could that not wait until you've got up, gone to the bathroom, had a shower, had a cup of coffee, and then maybe grab it? You're kind of setting your day up to go downhill from there. And you're already lying in bed. So how low down do you want to go? And this is what I mean about people choosing to be overwhelmed and stressed, in that sense that we have control over things. We have control over this. You can switch it off. You can leave it in a different room. You can do things with it. You can go for a walk without taking it. But people, it's almost become like a fifth limb for a lot of people. Like you wouldn't leave your arm if you went out for a walk, would you? No, of course you would. You can't detach it and just leave it there. But most people take this with them, almost like they take their house key now. Keys, phone, wallet.
Yeah.
Why not just keys?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I think that's the thing, that we've formed these habits. So we do a lot of these things unconsciously, unintentionally. So like you say, waking up in the morning, the phone's next to bed, you just automatically pick it up, start scrolling through, like say emails, newsfeed, etc. And as you say, that can drain your energy, start to take in all that media and information, and you're starting off the day already feeling drained and overwhelmed before you've even, as you say, got out of bed and fully started the day. So I think you're right that we do have choices, but a lot of the time we just do things automatically and we don't consciously think about it. But by actually taking that time and setting intentions and thinking, okay, well, actually, like you say, going for a walk, do I need to take my phone with me? Actually, it's quite liberating to just leave it there for half an hour while I just go for a walk around the block. And yeah, what I suppose the question is, what's the worst that's going to happen? I think we've been able to survive so long without them, but now they're just such a big part of our lives.
Isn't that weird? You just said it can be so liberating. That that's kind of synonymous with how much these things have become part of our lives. You feel liberated not to take it with you, and it makes me smile because, like, going back to my childhood, these things didn't exist. So you'd go for a walk, you didn't have your phone on an extendable cable that you took with you. You didn't have a box where a carrier pigeon could land and have a message delivered. You went out, you went and did your stuff, you went shopping, you went on your walk or whatever, and you came back. And if there was an urgent call, the person would have rung you a couple of times and they'd ring you again, because
Yeah.
they would keep ringing until they got hold of you if it was that important.
Mm.
This is what people miss. People think, oh, yes, this is an emergency. I must be available to be contacted right now.
Mm.
My kid's traveling in Australia and I need to be connected. Well, look, if they're in Australia, they're several thousand miles away. They're a 24-hour plane ride away.
Mm.
If, God forbid, something that has happened, knowing that instant is happened isn't going to change anything, because you can't do anything. So again, we put all this unnecessary stress on ourselves and this unnecessary worry. And like the news, people still connect into the news via the phone or the TV or the radio or the newspapers, whatever, multiple times a day. And what is the news? The news is just bad information, as in negative information, or repeated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I once did a kind of like a home experiment years ago. I got up really early and I listened to Radio 4 at 6 o'clock, where they do like a half-hour news program. And I
Mm.
kind of made some notes. And what I realized was that what the BBC, probably all the other channels do, was they'd take snippets from that half-hour program when they had a politician on or the business person, and they would make that the news. If there was nothing happening in the world, if there's been no catastrophe, they would make that the news, and they would kind of make that the headlines throughout the day. And it was repeated, 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 repeated. And is there any wonder people get stressed out with a political party or this business or that business when they're hearing the same thing over and over and over again? And
Mm.
it's not needed. It's not necessary. I deliberately don't have a TV in the house, not because of any moral values, because I know if I had a TV in the house, I'd sit there and just watch it all day long, and that's just not what I want. But what I don't do is I don't buy newspapers anymore, and I just limit myself to checking the news app on here once a day for 2 minutes, just a quick scroll through the headlines. Because let's face it, the headlines are pretty much the same every single day. You know, something bad is going on in the world, some kind of war, some kind of catastrophe. Somebody famous has probably died. Some member of parliament or member of government has got their fingers caught in the till, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, and the weather's crap. So we know, we can pretty much guess without putting the names into a space the kind of things that's going on in the world that the news want to focus on.
Mm.
Why put yourself through that? Why do you need that additional stress? Now, some people will say, well, I need to know what's going on in the world, Paul. Yeah, I get that. But do you need to know what's going on in the world, Paul, every hour? Unless it's your job to be connected and plugged in and respond to that, most of us, the answer is no. Do we actually need that additional weight on our shoulders? And my answer is no, you don't. But people still, again, like you were saying earlier on, probably through a subconscious habit, they've developed to wake up, check my emails, check the news, turn the radio on while I have my breakfast and listen to the woes of the world. What a great way to start your day.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that's the thing, because it is happening at a subconscious level, that we just, a lot of our actions become habits and automatic, and yeah, we never really stop to reflect on, well, actually, how is this making me feel? What is impacting on, why am I feeling so stressed? And again, we can then identify, well, it must be my job, or it must be this, that, and the other. But actually, there's certain actions that we're taking that we do have a choice over, and we do have that control. So coming back to that thing around, there's certain things we can control, and that's what we should look at, and the things we can't control, then we can leave again.
What do you think the reason is that makes people not do those checks? So not look at what's causing the stress in their life and then remove as much of that as possible?
I suppose there could be a few things there. I think one, life is so busy that we often just don't have that time. We're just constantly on the go doing things, and yeah, and a lot of the time I think we don't necessarily reflect on ourselves and give ourselves that time to look at those things, because we're always there doing things, make sure everything's done, that the house is okay, the job's done, the people we love and care about and support are okay. And I think, again, because a lot of the time it is, we've talked about being at a subconscious level, so we don't even realize that it's happening necessarily. So, and it's only when it comes to a point perhaps when we're so stressed and overwhelmed, or something happens and you get to a point, you go, right, something needs to change here. And that's when we will then reflect and think, okay, well, what can change, or what can we do to change? But a lot of the time I think people just sort of drift along and just accept this is how it is, or don't realize that there are certain things that they can do.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think one of the saddest things about us as humans is it often takes a catastrophe in our personal lives to happen before we stop and take stock and then make changes. I
Mm.
mean, I've interviewed, I think I said to you before we went live, I've interviewed probably somewhere around 70 people now, maybe a bit more, a bit less. And a lot of those
Mm.
people have had to have gone through a catastrophe. They've had to have left a really nasty relationship. They've been beaten up, or they've been in accidents, or they've had some major kind of illness. And it's that thing that's made them take the step back and reflect on their lives and go, you know what, I don't like this. I don't like the way things are going. I want to make changes. And I would love you to hear your thoughts on what we can do to kind of make those changes without having to wait for the catastrophe first.
Yeah, I suppose, I think the more that we can be having these kind of conversations and bringing it to people's awareness that they do have choices, and that they, that there are things that can happen. Because I think you're right. Because sometimes we'll have these bit of wake up calls. It could be that we, again, we hear something on the news, or somebody we know something happens to, and you're just like, that's a reminder, life is precious, life is short. But then we quite easily fall back into the old habits that we have. So I think, the more we can be having these conversations, the more awareness that people can have. I think if it can become more of a cultural thing in society around, the I'm just thinking it could be in the workplace, it could just be in general, and what we can be doing with our families and within the home, so that we are intentionally trying to change our mindset and our approach to things, so that we have greater awareness. I think it is a is going to be key with this. And I think there is starting to be more awareness and more discussions around this, but I still feel that it's yeah, there's a long way to go. And as we said, because we fall back into these automatic habits, that you can have a conversation with someone, but then life continues and it's forgotten about. So yeah, again, I suppose it's that repetition, isn't it? It's just keeping those conversations going. I mean, is there anything in particular that you were thinking of, Paul, that would help with this?
Yes, but I don't know how to implement it. I equate where we are now with the seatbelt law, because before seatbelts came in, people were being horribly injured and killed on a
Mm,
regular basis every time there was a car accident for the simple reason they weren't wearing a seatbelt. And
mm,
then the law came in, and all these people were talking about, oh, my freedom, I don't want to have to wear a seatbelt. I feel
mm,
constricted, and I'd be trapped in a fire and all this. And it took a
mm,
lot of time before the majority of people accepted that, yeah, actually, a seatbelt could save my life. There are
mm,
still people who drive cars without wearing seatbelts, despite all the
mm,
kind of safety features put in there. And I see it every day, one or two people not wearing a seatbelt when they're driving along. And to me, that is the mentality that we've got to overcome now. In the talking about mental health and physical health and getting healthy and living a healthier lifestyle, getting rid of as much unnecessary negativity out. And I'm not saying you have to be Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. Jolly positive all the time, because that's just not feasible. And we're not built. We're built to accept challenges. We're built to overcome. We're built to endure.
mm,
The biggest challenge for me is that we are becoming, the majority of us, far too comfortable in that, we don't have these challenges that we've had to, go through in the past. We haven't had to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and work 14 hours a day to bring the food, to get money for the food, and 6 days a week and no holidays. And we are, again, I'm talking about the majority. I know there are people that really, really do struggle, and I'm not kind of negating that, but I'm talking about the majority here. The majority of us have it easy, in fact, too easy, that we don't face any of these kind of challenges anymore. And when you have things too easy, too kind of luxurious with a small L, you stop looking for challenges. You stop looking for ways to push yourself and to learn and to grow. And this is when all the other stuff starts to sneak in. The having the phone by the bedside and watching the news all the time, because that's how, I know this sounds bizarre, but that's how we get our feed of challenge. Ooh, how am I going to overcome worrying about all this stuff? What happens if? What happens if? I mean, I had some therapy a long time ago, and the therapist said to me, "What was I doing?" It was a coping mechanism, and that I would worry about X, Y, or Z happening. And then my brain would go,
mm,
okay, well, if this happened, what would you do? If that happened, what would you do? And she said to me, what are you doing? That's a coping mechanism. Even though the chances of that thing happening are so far remote, your brain wants to figure out how you're going to deal with it. And once you come up with a plan, it will kind of put that to bed and then find something else to worry about.
yeah.
And I think this is what's happening for a lot of people, because we don't have that, that need to go out and work really, really, really hard physical manual labor, or to kind of surmount lots and lots of challenges. We create these unnecessary challenges that push us to the limits, like drinking too much booze, or doing too many drugs, or driving without a seatbelt. All these things that are avoidable, but we kind of let stuff into our life. Again, talking about automatic habits that suddenly start to kind of take us over. And before we know it, we're in this massive hole. And now we've got a real challenge. We've got a real thing to struggle against, because we are now on something, yeah, or we've now
Mm,
got a situation where we've got so much debt. What do I do? How do I get out of it? Because we don't. I think a lot of it is due to the fact that we don't take responsibility for our lives. We don't take responsibility for every single decision we make. We blame everybody else. All you have to do is kind of scroll down any feed, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and you'll see people blaming other people or institutions for their situation. Oh, I'm 50 grand in debt. Well, that's the credit card company's fault for giving me the card in the first place. Well, no, you applied for the card. You used the card to buy whatever it was you bought, knowing full well you have the money to pay it back.
mm,
So, yeah, I think a lot of the time it is self-inflicted, because we need to face, bizarrely, these challenges, and we kind of, because we don't have to go out and face them. Some people do. Some people, they will go climb Mount Kilimanjaro, or they'll go to the gym and get as big and strong as they possibly can. They'll enter competitions. People will do bake off, and people will, go and get multiple degrees. So some people are out there building challenges for themselves to kind of improve where they are. But a lot of us just don't do that, or we don't do it in a way that is helpful to us.
Mm. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think some of that potentially comes down to, though, again, comes back to those beliefs about, if people don't have that self-belief or that, self-confidence that they can do these things, so that can hold them back from setting up those challenges, because the fear of, again, we've talked about, not being able to control everything. So what if I get this wrong? What if I'm then judged? What if I'm criticized? What if I'm rejected? And so I think, again, it might not be necessarily intentional that people are going, oh, I'm just not going to, I'm just going to sail through life, or I'm just going to blame everyone else. I think a lot of the time it can also be that it's the, what's happening internally. So like I say, the lack of confidence, self-belief, um, that, yeah, that and again, people may not always recognize that. So, they're thinking, right, I'm trying to work hard, I'm trying to do all this, but then they're in this conflict of, I'm trying to prove myself, but at the same time, the fear of going all out and taking those risks, because, as I say, the fears that are attached to that. And I think that's a key thing, because as society, as humans, social contact is key. It's how we survive. Going back to what we were talking about earlier about the cavemen, if you were a lone person, then the chances are that saber-tooth tiger is going to come and get you. Whereas we it's part, again, of our DNA and our culture to have that connection. So when we have those fears of that we could be criticized or judged, I think, again, that can hold us back from a lot of things.
I think that's probably the biggest reason, or part of the biggest reason, people don't do more for themselves, is that fear of, whether it's fear of success, fear of failure, fear of sticking your head above the parapet, imposter syndrome,
Mm,
all of those kind of things, which stems from, again, right from the day we're born, when people go with the best of intention, generally speaking, they go, no, don't do this, don't do that, no, that's too tall, you might fall, you might hurt yourself, don't do that, that's too fast, wear your helmet, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And then you get the
mhm,
kind of the not so good negatives. So, for example, again, going back to my school days, having the board rubber thrown at you by the teacher because
mhm,
you were misbehaving, or being kicked out of the class because, again, a friend had passed your note to you, and you're the one that got caught with the note, so you were kicked out of the class. And, oh, Wilson, you're so stupid, you won't amount to anything of this. And then kids
mhm,
in the class, kids can be evil to other kids. I don't care what anybody says, you know. And your peers calling you an idiot, calling you too fat, too thin, too tall, too short, too this, too that, too the other. And all of this stuff gets locked in that subconscious mind year after year after year. Then you become a grown up, and then you get a job, and Wilson, you didn't do that report like I told you to. You're an idiot. You're fired, or you're demoted, or whatever. And that gets lodged
mhm.
in the background. And
Yeah.
we kind of get to a stage where, I'm not going to say we give up. We stop pushing. We go, you know what? Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, you're right. I am useless. I've reached the level of my competence. I'm not going to try and push beyond this, because there's no point,
Mm,
unless you either hear a conversation, or you have a catastrophe, or you bang your head against the wall, and suddenly you go, you know what? I need to change something because I'm not happy. And again,
mm,
I think the word I was looking for earlier on is a catalyst.
mm,
For those people that have made the changes, there's usually some kind of catalyst. It could be a conversation, it could be a catastrophe, it could be some bad news, it could be anything. There is
mm,
usually a catalyst that kind of bangs you over the head and drags you across the floor, going, how many more times have I got to shake you before you start taking some action? And then
mm,
you to use euphemism, you wake up and you realize that actually it's all this baggage that you've been carrying that's
mm.
holding you back. And if you can find a way to drop that baggage, then you're able to move forward and have more fun and do more.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think that's the thing. I wish more people were aware, and as you were saying earlier, I think you know that when people make those change, it's usually that something has happened, and again, the same for myself, that we wait till we get to that point before we go, right now, I can't continue like this, something needs to change. And I just wish that more people were aware and would start to look at, how they can start making those changes before they get to that point. So hopefully they'll never get to that point. And what I mean by that is, life comes with its challenges. Unfortunately, life isn't plain sailing, but actually it's about, by dealing with the past and as you say, that sort of baggage that we're carrying and those beliefs that we formed, by working on them and changing them, it means that we are then in a better position to be able to manage life stresses as they come along, have and be able to achieve more and feel more fulfilled. I think again it's about what's important to us and leading our life that way rather than what we think we should be doing. And a lot of that again can come from society in terms of what, the messages we've had growing up around the people around us, but also society. And, again, some of the key things are, you must work hard, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And people continue to live in that framework and that pattern and those beliefs. But actually, is that helping them? Is that serving them? Or actually is that again leading to the stress and overwhelm?
And the thing is, there is no one way of getting people to that stage of awareness, because I've thought about this before. Education can't do it, parenting can't do it. It's got to be, it's almost like it's a challenge in itself to accept that you need to do something to change things up. We need to have this catalyst. And I think the only solution really is to figure out a way of putting more catalysts in front of people, not necessarily the catastrophic ones, but more things like this conversation, more conversations in general, more, I don't like the word awareness, because awareness means, well, yeah, okay, I've heard about it, it's over there somewhere. I think you need to kind of put it front and center in people's minds, a bit like the adverts from the 70s and 80s. They were very, very overt. They were everywhere. You couldn't walk down the street without seeing an advert for, I don't know, Brill cream or something, and it was all over the place. And I think that's what needs to happen. We need to be making people aware of the possibilities of taking responsibility, not the possibilities, the benefits of taking responsibility for your actions, and the fact that you do have choices to make. And that's the critical thing, that you are able, most of us are able to make choices to change things if we decide to do so.
Definitely. And again, I think that comes back to that control element as well. Sometimes people think that, well, this is how life is, I can't make any changes, I have no control over that. But actually this is something that people can do. They as we said earlier, they can choose how they think, they can choose how they respond to situations, events, etc. And I think you're right. I think it's about, how do we enable people to, I know you said you don't like the word awareness, but I suppose I'm thinking of it, well, is if we're acting in a subconscious level and an automatic pilot, then we're not thinking about it. So it's about being consciously aware and going, actually, yes, I can see that pattern, I can make those changes, I can do something about this. And I think, as you say, there isn't this magic wand to say, okay, let's do this. It's about how do we continue to have these conversations and allow people to know that they can make these choices.
I bought a magic wand and I'm going to send it back for a refund because it doesn't do magic. I've gone, Shazam and abracadabra. I've done all this kind of stuff, you've seen the movies, and so I've sent it back for a refund. So listen, Jo, how do you help people?
So I'm a coach, and I work with people who, as we talked about, feeling stress and overwhelm. Usually it can be for a whole range of reasons, but normally it's around trying to juggle all of life's responsibilities, as we've been talking about. And I have a program, so I work one-to-one with people. I've also just launched a Facebook group, so it's a free group, again, for people feeling stressed and overwhelmed from trying to juggle, with their careers and businesses with their personal life, where I'm doing some free talks and training and posting content, providing tips and advice about how people can be able to work on their confidence and self-belief, and to be able to create that balance within their lives. So it's called transfer can't say it now. Transform stress. Try again. You can tell it's brand new. I'll put my teeth back in. So transform stress for balance and success. So yeah, again, it's about being able to reach as many people as possible, and to be able to provide that knowledge, that awareness. I know that's the word you said you don't like, but yeah, just to continue to be able to give different opportunities for people to become more knowledgeable about it.
Who is your ideal kind of client? Who do you like working with the best?
Well, the majority of my clients tend to be women, who probably between the ages of about 30 to about 55, something like that. And again, I think it's that where, you know, they've got their career or their business, and they're trying to juggle that against, as I say, you know, sort of family, relationships, you know, the home, everything in between. And as I say, I offer a program, and I deliver my program online. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is obviously, you know, with the you know, where we've been living, everything being remote at the moment in terms of support. But it also means that when people are so busy, it means they haven't got to commute and add in those additional things that they need to factor in. But also it means that I can support people all over the country, all over the world even. So again, it gives that sort of flexibility to be able to to support people in the best way possible.
Where's the best place for people to reach you? Are you on any particular platform in preference, or are you everywhere?
So
Everywhere.
everywhere. So yeah, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. So my name is Joanna Glassock, and my company is Joanna Glassock Coaching, so keeping it nice and simple. So on Instagram and Facebook it's Joanna Glassock Coaching, and obviously LinkedIn is Joanna Glassock. And I also have a website which is www.joannaglassock.com. So I like to keep it nice and simple.
Nothing wrong with simple. I like simple. So don't worry about taking notes. I will put all of those in the kind of the show notes when I publish this episode, so you don't need to write that down or rewind. Okay, Joe, listen, we've come into virtually an hour we've been chatting. Any final thoughts, any kind of last words that you want to leave to the audience today before we go?
Well, I suppose really it's just about I hope this has enabled people to see that, you know, we do have choices in life, and it's about just being consciously aware and setting intentions about, actually, you know, what am I thinking? Is this factually correct? You know, what are my behaviors? What am I doing? Actually, is this serving me? Is this helping me? Does this, you know, so when we talk about the scrolling, that kind of thing, if it feels good, great, do it. But if you're just doing it out of habit, then make a choice, do something different. So and thank you so much for inviting me along today, Paul. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and and all the best.
Thanks, Joe, for that. I just love that. You know, if it makes you happy, do it, as long as it's between consenting adults, of course.
Of course.
Listen,
Oh, yeah.
thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate your time, and I'll see you again on the next episode. Bye for now, folks.
Thanks. Bye.